Aye.
Okay.
Which is not the end of public comment. Thank you. Charnel James appearing for the applicant, Mark Davis, and co-owner, Todd Kern. So this is a case that we're asking to be sent back to the Planning Commission. During the Planning Commission hearing, there was discussion as to whether or not they had control and ownership of the property at the time of the May 10th date. Now, this was a sale agreement that was entered into on April 9th with the closing date of April 29th. We're providing, I only have 2 copies, so forgive me on that. This was presented at the previous hearing. It is the sale agreement and the entering of escrow.
Was this presented in the original
Yes.
Planning Commission?
Yes, that was presented.
We should have it in our board packet.
I don't believe I saw it in the board packet, but I want to make, I only have 1 copy anyway for you guys to review. Peter, was the sale agreement, Peter, I didn't see it in the staff report, but so the intent on this property was the purchase was entered into on April 9th. It was to close on April 29th. The property owner, when they came time to close the escrow, that was discovered that there was a cloud on the title, a lien that had been paid off many years before that had not been properly removed from the title. The previous owner, which was Rod Lanthriff, had to track down the previous owner to have her sign off on that loan, and it took some time in order to get that. They did provide, there was fencing material that was delivered during that time frame for the intent for them to start building the garden and to put the fence in. What was not presented at the the Planning Commission, which we are requesting to be sent back to the Planning Commission, was the statement from the seller that says that there was authorization for building material to be delivered to the property ahead of time before the close of escrow. We also have with us today the sale agent, who her understanding was also that they would have access to the property. Also, we have presented the groundwork that has begun to move and the fencing work that was started with a date stamp of April 21st. Because this additional information wasn't available to them at the Planning Commission appeal, we are asking that with this additional information that this board send this matter back to the Planning Commission for further consideration as to whether or not that they had ownership and control of the property at the time of the May 10th deadline that came into effect under the urgency ordinance. Keeping in mind that as of April 9th, there was no May 10th deadline even known about, nor was there at April 29th when escrow was going to close. They were doing everything diligently in order to clear that cloud on the title so full ownership could be done. The title was finally cleared and escrow was finally recorded on June 6th, and I have a copy of the deed, which also should be in your pack, but I have another copy for you as well. And if I could have the agent come up real quick and give her interpretation of it, so what you guys would have with this additional information between the stuff I've just presented to you and the testimony of the selling agent. I hope that that is sufficient evidence for you to refer this matter back to the Planning Commission for further consideration. Go ahead and speak into the microphone. Give them your name and what you want.
My name is Carol Cherry. I live in Glencoe, and I am the broker owner of Jackson Realty. And I represented Todd and Mark on this, and as well as Rod on this transaction.
Tell me your interpretation.
When we started this, we had no idea about this cloud on title, and we could not find this. All the funds were in escrow. All the conditions had been met. We were ready. And so actually I'm the one that ended up finding her through paying a company on the internet to identify where she was, and then was able to make contact through social media. And then I contacted the title company, and they in turn then sent her a package, and were able to get a response from her. When she first got my information, she didn't quite understand what was going on. Her husband had died a number of years ago, and she told me later that she had just stuck all the paperwork back in some boxes and never completed anything. So it was a long, arduous journey to get this thing cleared up, but that was the only thing that held us up from this close of escrow. Todd, in the meantime, I mean, the property was wide open, and he continued to go over there, and we did everything we could. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, he went ahead and started the fencing, and so as soon as we closed escrow, then he was able to continue doing what he was supposed to have been doing all along. Do you have any questions?
Any questions of the appellant?
Escrow was estimated to close on April 29th.
Oh, yeah. We saw no reason. I mean, this was a willing buyer and a willing seller, and we had everything in place. We had all the funds in, everything was done.
Is there a title search?
There
I mean,
was,
in this-
there was at the time, and that's when the title company found that this reconveyance had not been completed.
When did the title company find that?
I think it was within a couple of weeks after acceptance, when we deposited the funds in escrow, I should say.
Okay, well, now I'm sort of getting lost in just a shade. Okay, originally, the first date is April 9th.
Right.
That must have been when you made your offer, and offer's accepted, and the contract is initiating?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and it was estimated to close on April 29th. And I know when real estate starts popping, the title companies get behind. But wouldn't the title company have been done by April 29th?
Well, they should have been, but they couldn't find the lady to sign off on the reconveyance. That was the only thing holding us up.
Do you have some kind of proof as to the
Yeah.
title companies?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you have some kind of proof as to the title companies' dates?
Part of what we would be presenting at the Planning Commission, which I don't have today, is the complete title report and a declaration from the title escrow officer.
Well, okay, but what you're asking us, or me, as part of the board, is to make a judgment that there's information that the Planning Commission didn't have, that they could reconsider,
Right.
and that would be part of it, but that's not here.
That is correct.
Okay.
But I do have the testimony of the selling agent, as well as the statement from the seller, which you have in front of you. You should have a letter in front of you with the seller's agent that also depicts the problems that happened with the cloud on title and the difficulty that they had in locating the former owner and her, for her signing off on that deed, which had been paid off years before.
Any other questions? No?
No, I've asked mine, thank you.
Mike, do you have any questions?
Who's developing investments?
I'm sorry, say
Who
again?
is developing investments incorporated?
That's the seller of the property. That's Rod's business.
It's an incorporated entity, right?
That is correct.
And the reason that we couldn't find the previous owner to sign off on the existing loan, or?
No, there was no existing loan. That was the problem. The loan had been paid off for quite some time. And Rod was not aware that it hadn't been, or Rob, excuse me, was not aware that it had not been taken off of title.
And Rob is developing investments,
That is correct.
and he's a corporation.
That is correct.
No further questions.
Were you, I do have one more, I'm sorry if I butted in, Debbie.
No, go ahead.
Were you cultivating before May 10th? I see pictures here.
I know that they were building the fence and doing that work, but I don't believe that the plants had been ready to be put into the ground at that point.
Okay, okay, there again, I don't want to jump back and forth on the urgency ordinance. Is the cultivating, okay, is it proof of them getting ready to grow, that are in the pots, or?
The language says that the registrant must provide evidence satisfactory to the planning director that no later than May 10th, he/she has taken demonstrable steps toward the development of a commercial medical cannabis cultivation site on the parcel as demonstrated by the criteria described in either A, and then there's a long list of different things they could provide to show that they were taking steps towards cultivating. There's another section that says that they're allowed to apply for the amount that they had prepared for or were previously cultivating.
Okay.
And part of what I've just provided to you was the purchase agreement, including the equipment that they needed, as well as the dirt was delivered prior as well. If Harvest Art Law Group actually submitted the application, so there's something else I
So
wanted to-
some of the things that are where we allow date stamp photographic evidence of grading and or earth moving commensurate with the area proposed for cultivation, date stamp photographic evidence of cultivation commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated, date stamp receipts for equipment and supplies in types and quantities commensurate with the commercial cannabis cultivation in the area proposed to be cultivated. So that kind of information is what we would look at to make the determination of had they taken multiple steps towards developing their cultivation area.
And the documents that I just provided to you are all evidence of that. Those are all things that we would like to present to the Planning Commission. We just feel that this isn't ripe for appeal in front of the board yet. We feel that it's definitely something that needs to be sent back to the Planning Commission.
Well, at least this one has a ship date on it. You know,
That's true.
I'll give it, and I don't mean to sound snide, but talking to someone who's dealt with so many invoices, I can't count them, put a received on date on these going forward with their signatures.
And the photograph submitted was April 29th,
April 21st, I believe.
21st, where there's a fence and
Right.
I think there's even a
preparation.
picture of the equipment as well as what I gave you as well.
Well, I think the Planning Commission's denial was based on the lease ownership, correct?
I believe there was
That's
no
correct.
lease.
There was the
Correct.
fact that there was no deed or lease prior to May 10th.
And that's part of what we feel that this additional information would have helped provided clarification to the Planning Commission. Again, I didn't represent them during the Planning Commission appeal hearing, and this would go forward to show that not only did they have permission to be on the property, that they were in escrow, that they had gone through significant movement, they had control of the property, but for this cloud on title, they would have had ownership of the property on April 29th, well before the deadline.
Any other questions?
No.
Are you finished with your presentation?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. So presentations by members of the public. 5 minutes, please. So
My
are you
name's
still under the appellate then?
Yeah, he would like to address the board
Okay.
as to their intent, so I'd like to present that as part of our.
I'm Todd Kern, and I came to Calaveras because it gives me the ability to be transparent.
I came here and did everything to the absolute best of my ability to be transparent in this process, to be a tax-paying grower. I'm not a criminal. I didn't fabricate any of this. I have a family. I have a 4-year-old son. I didn't know about the cloud of title. I have everything I own into this. Everything. I brought in a partner who has 4 kids who used his savings to help me out in belief that this dream could be mine. Like Legendary Farms, our corporation, could be something my kids had. And I came to you guys. I came to Calaveras. Could have gone to Humboldt. Could have gone to Mendo. There's places I could have gone. This cloud of title, guys, was completely out of my control. I was on every single faction of this thing. I want to be transparent. I want to be part of this community. I want to be paying taxes to you guys. It's what I want. It's what I've been fighting for. I guess that's all I have. I mean, this is going to be a huge, this is going to change my life. This is really going to change my life.
Okay. Is that it for the appellant?
Yes, that's it for us.
Presentations by members of the public? Nobody? Okay. So you get another chance.
Again, just to reiterate, what we're looking for is the opportunity to go back in front of the planning commission. I'm so sorry. What we're looking for is the opportunity to go back in front of the planning commission. They were unrepresented when they presented themselves in front of the planning commission, and they need the opportunity for a fair hearing to be able to present all of the evidence that is necessary in order to show the planning commission how that they had not only had owners' permission and they were in the process of being owners, but they had control and possession of the property at the time that the urgency ordinance was voted into place. And we're asking for that opportunity by a referral back to the planning commission for reconsideration. Thank you.
Okay, is that it?
That is it. Thank you.
So we get a chance, another chance for members of the public to come forward. Okay. I'm going to close the appeal hearing now, and then we move. So we'll move into board discussion. Okay.
Mr. Mauer?
Yes.
Could you relate the reason for the rejection of this application one more time?
So this was rejected because there was not a lease, nor was there a deed transferring title prior to May 10th. It was in escrow. I realized that escrow was delayed through no fault of the purchaser. But during the adoption of the urgency ordinance, there was a lot of discussion about allowing people who were in escrow to be able to participate in the ordinance. And the decision by the board was that no, you had to own the property. They did not own the property. It's unfortunate that they invested a lot of money in that, but they did not own the property. And so this sets a precedent for anyone else who had some delay in their escrow. It opens the doors, and I'm very concerned about that. This does not prevent him from growing in the future. If we adopt a permanent ordinance that allows someone to file for a new application, but I'm very concerned that this would have a negative effect on our ability to say, here's a clear deadline of when the ordinance was adopted, and your decision that we were not going to allow people who were in escrow to participate in this ordinance under the urgency provisions.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, to me, this is a case where it could have been continued, in my opinion, because there could be title papers that are out there, but we have not seen them. If we're basing it on what we have today, it's not a lot different than the case that just came before us. Now, I have no basis on sending it back to the planning commission. What we are risking are all the people who have done this correctly at this time.
Did it? Do you have more, Steve?
No, I'm done at the moment.
Debbie?
Well, I think this is another case of some extenuating circumstances, but I do recall that discussion about the urgency ordinance and wanting, the lease or ownership of property. And I know specifically in my district, because I had contact with several that were in the same dilemma with property being in escrow and falling out for one way or the other, and some of it was successful and approved. I do have concerns about, in this particular situation where escrow is iffy. In this case, the cloud was discovered and settled, but what about the other kinds of opportunities or times when the cloud is not settled and it continues and people still continue to proceed with their business? So I'm inclined at this point to support the Planning Commission's denial on this particular one.
Okay, so is that a motion?
Mike, have any comments? Did you have any comments?
Yeah, I would concur with Supervisor Ponte. The regulation in the ordinance is pretty clear.
Okay.
It doesn't reference any purchase agreement. It's a lease. And I know we had a prior case, but in this particular circumstance, I believe there was a violation of that ordinance, and I would support denying the appeal.
All right, so we have a motion yet?
I'll make a motion to uphold the Planning Commission's decision.
I second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So we had a motion by Supervisor Ponte, second by Supervisor, who was it? Ernie. And it was four ayes and one absent to uphold the Planning Commission's appeal. Planning Commission's denial of the appeal, right? Okay. All right.
Item 21 is from the Planning Department to review and discuss the Planning Department's report on the status of implementing the urgency ordinance regulating medical cannabis cultivation.
Should we all swap out the PowerPoint?
Okay.
Peter, could you just... Thank you. Thank you.
So as everyone knows, on May 10th, the county adopted an urgency ordinance that allowed for and regulated the cultivation of medical cannabis.
Can I ask a question? Was cannabis cultivated in Calaveras County before that date?
Oh, certainly, yes.
Then we didn't allow the cultivation of cannabis in Calaveras County before that date. We
There
didn't
was
allow it
no-
after that date.
There was no, in fact, it wasn't allowed until May 10th. It was not explicitly allowed until May 10th.
It was allowed under 215. I'm saying What we did was, we declared the intent to regulate cannabis.
Well, I guess the word allow is up there as opposed to banning it, as many other counties have done, particularly those around us. So that's why.
Regulate as opposed to banning,
Correct.
not allow, because it's been here for a long time. So we didn't allow anything.
Okay. Cannabis cultivation has been occurring in the county for a number of years, by many accounts, many decades. We have been working on trying to draft an ordinance for several years. Certainly since I've been here in the last 2.5 years, it's been a high priority. And we had had a number of hearings to discuss whether or not to ban it or whether to regulate it. The last hearing we had was, I believe it was a joint meeting with the planning, I'm getting confused with the name. But anyways, a large meeting at Town Hall, I believe, and at that point in time, the board declared its intent not to ban it and to regulate it. So pardon the misuse of the term. That created a land rush, a lot of people coming to the county to purchase land. The word got out that Calaveras was going to be a place that would regulate it rather than ban it. And we saw a number of people moving to the county to acquire land in order to cultivate. In addition, the Butte Fire created a situation where there were a number of parcels of land, people that lost their homes, their property was destroyed by the fire, decided they would prefer to sell rather than try to rebuild, and so that land was on the market. So there was a large number of land sales in the Butte Fire area as well as throughout the county that created high demand. The loss of screening also in the Butte Fire created a situation where suddenly what was maybe hidden in the woods previously was very visible to neighbors, to people driving by. Because of this, not just the recent growing, but even going back further, we were getting increasing numbers of complaints from neighbors, neighborhood groups about cannabis cultivation in their neighborhoods, and so. In May, the board decided we needed to do something, and so we adopted an urgency ordinance that intended to put a cap on the amount of growing until we could adopt permanent regulation. For the next slide, I think. So the ordinance was adopted as an urgency ordinance because of findings of urgency. We needed to establish some regulations in place so it wasn't a free-for-all. We were trying to make sure that any ordinance that we were creating was consistent with MRSA, the Medical Marijuana Regulatory and Safety Act that the state passed last fall. We wanted to try to protect the public health, safety, and welfare through establishing some regulations that address those issues, as well as minimizing environmental effects from grading and water diversions and those kinds of things. Next, please. So the ordinance established a number of different standards. We limited cultivation area to that was previously cultivated or prepared prior to May 10th, 2016. We just had an example of discussion on some of those issues of what was cultivated, how much. The Planning Commission has been addressing this a lot in different appeals. This is a challenge that we have as staff, is trying to establish what actually was out there at the time. The maximum canopy is 22,000 square feet. That's approximately half an acre. You establish zoning criteria. Certain zones allow it, others don't. 75-foot setback from the property lines. Certain standards regarding lighting, fencing, posting, noise. So all the things that we would try to utilize to minimize the impact of the cultivation while still allowing it and regulating it. It required inspections by both code enforcement and the sheriff's office, as well as compliance with any number of state and local environmental regulations. Next. So the board established a deadline of June 30th in order to submit your application. All of the information in the application required to be complete. We had estimated that there might be about 300 to 400 applications. We knew we were going to need additional staffing to do that. Based on the fee amount and a conservative estimate, we said, okay, if we get 200 commercial applications, that's $1 million. And with $1 million, we could hire a couple extra planners, some deputies, another vehicle, and we looked at what we could do with that. And so that's what we anticipated. We thought there might be more, but we didn't want to go out and recruit for positions that didn't have the money in order to have those positions available. What we got totally overwhelmed us and surprised us all. 740 commercial applications with additional 255 personal and caregiver grows. That's almost 1,000 applications. And we've been dealing with that since. Next. Just for some reference, here's a map, try not to be too specific, of the sort of heart of the cultivation area, District 2 primarily, Mountain Ranch, Terrero Flat, Wilseyville, West Point area. All of those colored blotches are parcels on which registrations have been received. The orange ones are still in the pending process. The blue ones we've reviewed for compliance of all the paperwork. The red one, a couple of red ones in there have been denied. The green one's sort of a unique situation. Don't need to go into the details. This is where most of the applications were filed. Next. But it's not just that. Here is the Burson, Wallace, Valley Springs area. You can see there's a number here. There's a lot of them in District 3. There's some down around Copperopolis. It's countywide. Granted, it's focused up in the Butte Fire area and in the area where cannabis was previously grown, up in primarily District 2, but also in the upper level, sort of east of Highway 49, up into the lower range of the forest. Next. So we developed a review process, and I like to say it's sort of like driving the bus down the highway while we're trying to build the bus. We had this rush of applications. We were trying to process them. We didn't have anything in place at the time that we adopted the ordinance, so we were trying to create a process while taking these applications. We had an intake process where applicants could come in at our front counter. We would take about a half hour to an hour to review their application, make sure they had everything. If they didn't have them, we'd send them away, say come back later. As we got towards the deadline of June 30th, that line got longer and longer. We moved over next door because we were taking up all of the counter space, both in our department as well as building. We had hired some extra help staff to process things, so we set up a satellite office next door here in Department 1 to process those. The review process that we have, once that intake process was done, then we're getting into the review of the applications itself. We're comparing the documents with the list of criteria that we have. Did it match our aerial imagery? Do the photographs actually represent what was on the site? Do the receipts for materials and equipment, relate to cannabis cultivation? As well as reviewing all the recorded documents, the deeds, the leases, the indemnity agreement. Inspections are part of the process. We have code enforcement, sheriff, and environmental management teams going out to the sites to look at everything from the canopy area to fencing, to posting, to environmental hazards, to illegal activities on the site, as well as background checks by the sheriff's office. That was something that was very important to the sheriff, was included in the ordinance to ensure that the wrong people weren't participating in this program. Next.
Mr. Mallon, can I
Yeah.
interrupt for a moment? Background checks on specifically
The registrant, and if the registrant is a corporation or a business, the principal officers of each of that corporation or that business.
not the actual working force.
Not necessarily the employees. So they were the principals involved in the, yeah. This is a flow chart of what it takes to go through the process. And you can see there's any number of spaces where you end up with denial. And that's sort of where we've been going so far. With, code enforcement will go out to a site, they'll see some violations, they'll give the grower a chance to correct those. If they don't, it's denied. The sheriff's office will look at it, they'll go out on part of the inspections. If they see, significant criminal activity or violations on the property, they can recommend denial. If they don't pass the background check, it's denied. Environmental management will look at it for environmental health, hazardous waste, hazardous materials handling requirements. If they don't satisfy their standards, it can be denied. We'll review it for all of the paperwork requirements, the zoning consistency, and again, if they don't meet the criteria, we have denied them. Ultimately, if you can check off all of those boxes, and if you go to the next slide, I think, this is our checklist. It's sort of small, it's 2 pages. I try to put it on one sheet here. Every one of those boxes has to be checked. Yes, it passes, it meets this criteria. Yes, it meets this criteria. We've done a site visit, and fencing is good, and the gating is good, and the security is right, and the lighting isn't shining on the neighborhood, and they aren't creating noise from a generator. They've met all of the legal standards for signatures for the corporation. Once all of those have been marked off, then we can issue the permit. Next. So as of today, code enforcement has done 61 site inspections, issued 27 citations. We have rejected 26 applications. You just heard 2 of those. We issued 2 registrations so far. 27 applications have been denied, and there have been 20 appeals processed so far. We're continually getting more, all of which so far have been denied by the Planning Commission. One was withdrawn before the hearing applied. And today you approved one and denied another. So I could add another column there, but I didn't have that in advance. The sheriff has done the background check for 142 sites. In many cases, these are multiple individuals because they're corporations with or they're partners. So anyone involved in the ownership of the cultivation has been or is in the process of being reviewed. So 142 of the 940 applications have been reviewed for compliance with background requirements. With the huge number of applications, we also got quite a bit more revenue than we anticipated, $3.7 million. To date, or as of last reporting period about a week and a half ago, about 1/10 of that's been spent, but we have commitments on personnel, vehicle purchases, particularly from the Sheriff's Office and code enforcement for a lot more, and we have a lot more work to do. 29 new positions, both permanent as well as extra hire, have been authorized. Purchase of 9 vehicles as well as other equipment for measuring, inspecting. But we've only done a small percentage of the processing. There's a lot of work to do. And one of the things we will need to do still is the review of the fee in light of how much it's taking to do all this and see if that fee is accurate. As you recall, we can only charge what it costs to implement the program. We can't make money on it, but we certainly don't want to lose money on it. So in the next several months, we'll be doing a fee analysis to determine whether or not the $5,000 for commercial grow is an accurate amount. It may be too high, it may be too low, we don't know that yet. We're still too early in the process. Next. So bottom line is we have been overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. It's difficult just trying to get out to the sites. The Sheriff's Office particularly has been stretched very thin. They do not have the resources to do all of the regular day-to-day work that they need to do, as well as accompany the inspection teams. We made a decision early on, we were not going to send inspectors out without law enforcement backup. We don't know what's out in some of these sites. Many of them are, great individuals, good neighbors, would not harm anyone going out there. Other people are not quite so nice, and we just don't want to risk any personnel. So we want to make sure that the Sheriff's Office is accompanying the code enforcement teams out there. If we could increase the number of teams, right now we basically have 1 team going out at a time. If we could increase that to 3 teams, we could cover a lot more, but we just don't have those resources at this point in time. At the same time, I think I included in my staff report the fact that my department normally handles about 150 applications a year. We have over 1,000 so far. That's a 7-fold increase in workload, and I've added 4 extra help staff, and that's about a 60%. So do the math, we just don't have the personnel to handle all of that. And this goes for all the other departments. Grading permits for the Public Works Department, all the environmental health inspections, well permits, everything that environmental management has to do. So we're doing the best we can. I know it's not enough for anyone's taste, not mine, not the public, certainly not yours, but we're working our way through it, and again, doing the best we can. The bottom line is we will not be able to process every application by the end of this growing season. And there are going to be people that probably shouldn't have been able to grow, that will grow, they will harvest. And our hope is that by, early next year, we will have finished that processing. We will deny their application, so they will not be back next year. And we will have the ability to go out there and enforce that with the denial of the application. But it's unfortunate. The timing is bad for us. That we are now in the review process, and yet it's harvest season. And so our focus has tried to be on the complaints, on the obvious violators, and that hopefully the majority of the growers that want to be good neighbors, they want to participate, they want to be successful businessmen and turn this industry into a legitimate business will do so, and we can focus our attention on those that don't intend to do so and weed them out, pun intended. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I think that there's representatives from Code Enforcement and the Sheriff's Office here as well, and other departments, if you have any questions of them.
Is there any way you could put that bullet point presentation in a PDF or something on the planning department's website? Or
This PowerPoint, yeah, certainly.
I'd sure like to see it. There's a lot of good info in there.
Okay.
And I do not remember everything you just said.
I will make sure that's posted tomorrow.
That'd be super. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter.
Peter, I had a question, because part of the urgency ordinance created a date of September 7th.
Yes.
Whether or not, if your application wasn't complete by that time, then it was denied? Is that still a process?
Yes, the December 7th deadline was a second deadline. There were there were 4 things that we knew that most growers were not going to be able to get by May 30th just because of the process they need to go through. It was a seller's permit from the Board of Equalization, a county business license, which is sort of the last thing that we will sign off on after we have issued the registration. So it's sort of cart before the horse kind of thing. The notice of intent or notice of applicability from the State Water Resources Control Board that deals with the amount of land disturbance and erosion control and coverage issues for water quality. And the 4th thing was registration of their business entity with the Secretary of State. So all of those things had to be submitted to the county by September 7th. We had another mini rush leading up to that date while people were getting that. And so we're reviewing that as well. And that's part of what we're waiting on in order to issue any permits. Some of the early registrants had that already. In fact, the 2 that we approved earlier were the first 2 applications that we received, and they already had that information prior to the adoption of the urgency ordinance. But those that were coming in at the towards the end were scrambling to get that. And so that's part of our review process, is make sure that they have that. If they did not submit it, they're going to get denied.
Okay. So that's because maybe that information wasn't submitted until the last minute of September 7th, equates to possibly why some of those permits haven't been totally issued. Kind of a like you said, kind of the last minute rush?
Yes, that is one of the many factors.
Okay. Majority of your presentation concentrated on the commercial aspect of it. How is the primary caregiver
We
working?
we had
255 caregiver and personal cultivation, most of them personal cultivation applications. Most of those have been reviewed and are ready to go. One of the things that we did notice, that a couple of commercial growers applied as personal or caregiver growers, and we were concerned that that might have been a way that people tried to avoid. Well, they're not going to look very closely at those. So we did a quick review of those just to make sure were they legitimate. There were a handful that were not, and we've denied those applications. Some of them are in the process of appeal. But the majority of them checked out. We're just waiting on site inspections. And again, that seems to be the biggest bottleneck right now is getting staff in the field to look at these things. And again, it's our focus on the complaints and the gross violators. Those we may not be able to get to unless we decide that we're going to modify our inspection process.
Okay. And the personal caregiver grow was more or less an open registration period.
Yes.
Do you find applications coming in on that?
We're still getting a few. Not as many now as we did, say, in July and August, but they're sort of trickling in.
Okay.
The intent was that a new grower, just discovered that, hey, it works for me, I'm going to grow some marijuana, wasn't constrained by the deadline of having had cultivated earlier. Okay. The main concern, I think, from the public, from law enforcement, were the large-scale commercial grows. Someone growing 100 square feet, that's about 6 plants, is not going to have the same impact and potential abuse as thousands of square feet.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your staff is stretched and others are. The staff has been hired, I think you mentioned 29 positions. I would assume if we looked at hiring additional staff for the planning department to process these quicker, it really wouldn't resolve the problem because then it impacts the other departments as planning commission is filtering out for a code enforcement inspection or the sheriff's department background check and that sort of thing.
It really needs to be sort of evenly distributed as far as the numbers. And the challenge right now is with the sheriff's office. It's just they're losing personnel. It's difficult to recruit. It's time-consuming to recruit. There's a long training process they need to go through. It's I can hire a planner and get them up to speed in a few weeks. I'm sure that Jim or Rick, who's here, can talk at length about how long it takes to bring someone on board on the force and to really be effective. And so that's probably our biggest challenge right now.
Okay, thank you.
Have you denied any of the applications based on aerial imagery?
We have as a component of it. So we contracted with a firm to take satellite imagery. It didn't happen quite as quickly as we'd hoped. It was, again, as we pointed out earlier, at the end of April to early June, and there was maybe a week to 10-day period where they were getting that information. It's been very clear in some cases that someone who had registered for 22,000 square feet, and you look at the site and it's nothing but woods, there was no preparation for cultivation out there. But we also look at all the rest of the information as well. We don't rely solely on that. And as was discussed, we're finding that it's not foolproof. There are some things, it's fairly good resolution, but it's not as good as Google Earth. And now we're sort of using both to say, okay, here we've got what we know. And Google Earth, fortunately, sort of flew the area for part of the county, at least, at the end of May as well. So we now have some Google Earth images that we can help sort of supplement what we're using on that. But it's been a great tool. It's been very, very helpful. We're looking forward to getting the next iteration of the images. It was flown at the very last week of August. You approved a contract at the beginning of September, and the firm had they had some free satellite time, so they just went ahead and did it in advance with no liability of the county, and now we have this imaging. So that will help us a lot, particularly in comparing what was there on the ground in May and what was it sort of towards the end of the season. There's still a lot of cultivation activity going on. It's the very beginning of harvest season now. I understand that depending on the variety and your location and all kinds of other agricultural factors, that harvest will last, up into November. So we've got, a ways to go still.
Okay.
But that aerial imaging has been very valuable for us.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Todd Barr, with the Building Department Co-Compliance Unit. I'd like to start by saying that I think we've made some pretty positive strides since we got started on this. We now have added 2 new officers specifically for the compliance checks and the enforcement of the medical marijuana. Of course, it is going to, again, we're going to have some issues getting these people up to speed training-wise. We have 1 officer that is pretty much spearheading the medical marijuana. She's got 2 that are pretty green. One of them coming along pretty well. And they'll come along quickly when it comes to things like canopy measurements and the urgency ordinance itself. It's the building and structural violations that we're running into that kind of intermix with this, that get a little bit complicated, and that's where I'll try to get involved and help them out with that. We have set a couple of goals, and within the next 30 days, we'd like to have at least, and I'm not saying we don't have any procedures in line, but we do, but we'd like to get some procedures set and refined so that we're a lot more efficient. Within the next 2 months, we'd like to be able to go out with 3 separate teams, 1 code enforcement officer paired with 1 deputy, so we can cover a little bit more ground. Again, it's a work in progress. I think we're getting better at it, and we'll continue to improve. So that's kind of where we're at as a unit.
Todd, didn't we have 3 code compliance officers allocated to you just for this?
Yes, there is now. There's 3, and they are on board. They are all on board.
I thought you just said 2. Maybe I'm mistaken.
No, there's 3, and they're all on board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
So do you have any statistics?
The statistics were provided to Peter. That was a Sabrina put those together for him. And like I said, that the number of citations, site visits, things like that. And over the past few days, actually, they've knocked out quite a few more site visits. But I want to say one thing about the citations, too. The citations that have gone out so far are the ones that are going to sites that just can't possibly, from what we can tell when we're out there and the evidence that we gather, that just cannot come into compliance. Many of the other sites that we visited, they're not in compliance. They've been given time to correct that, and we will continue to give them reasonable amounts of time to work on the violations and to bring them into compliance.
Mr. Barr,
Yes, sir.
run down the quick procedure on the hot tip line. How do we get those complaints handled, and how do we categorize them and the prioritizing of them?
I believe that Captain Macedo should probably help me address that. I know, because that hot tip line actually goes through the Sheriff's Department, so I think I'll let him address that, if that's okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
That'll work.
I know we have a part in categorizing that, but I'll...
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you go out for these inspections, are you doing them by appointment? Do you just show up at a site? How does that work for your department or your area?
No, until we get to know the people and the site, we will go out without making an appointment and with a deputy. Once we get familiar with the sites and get to know the people and we're comfortable with where we're going, then at that time, this is later on down the road. I mean, the people that we brought on don't know the county, they don't know the people, like maybe some of the other officers that have been here a while do. So there's going to take some time for them to get familiar. So once we get to know them, then yeah, appointments will be made to go out, do the inspection, so it's a lot more efficient. And at that time, you can probably make 5-6 contacts in a day and be able to keep up with the paperwork. Where the real work begins is once the violations have been identified and the citations are issued. That's when the paperwork and the work really starts to pile up.
So when you just show up, do you leave a note that you were there, or you could maybe show up 3 or 4 times and not the right person be there? Or, you know, I know sometimes there are locked gates and they're not going to know that you're there to get in if it's a locked gate. How do you manage that?
Most of the time, a card is left so that they can contact us.
Okay,
And then the folks that are assigned to that unit make the arrangements with them to do the visits.
okay, all
Okay.
right. And then on the measurement of it, is there been training so that as you're measuring the farm, what kind of tools are you using to measure canopy size?
It's actually a measuring wheel in most instances that we use to measure. And I have to say that they're quite forgiving when it comes to strange angles and different dips, things like that on property. I know I went to one that was quite a bit over, but there was probably 200 or 300 square feet of structure that was actually right in the middle of the grow, and it should have been included, but we didn't even include that, you know, just to, like I said, we were being very, very lenient
Yeah.
on that.
Well, I just see, as I've seen pictures, you know, it's, you know, not everything is kind of like a vineyard, to where you've got your rows and you're lined up and, you know, it's rectangle shape or whatever. Some of these grows that I see are, you know, you have some over here and you have a maybe greenhouse here and there's more of a grow. So I was just wondering how you might take all of that in consideration. And then if there's, you know, the applicant applies for, say, a 22,000 and they're growing at 18, and you believe there's a discrepancy from your end or their end, is there any resolution to how that gets resolved? And I'm thinking, as I look at this, it's like what gets documented, recorded, noted, whatever. As we have Measure C on the ballot, and we're talking about taxation of the grow, making sure that we're getting everything that's entitled in regards to taxation, as well as, you know, whatever is noted there is true. So
Well, in fairness to everyone, just the canopy of the grow is measured. So if you've got 2 or 3 different sites, we're not counting roads in between, and for instance, access roads, tractor roads, whatever. Now, if you're talking a walking path, then the walking path, yes, it would be included, for instance, in the square of this podium. Okay, that's part of your canopy. But if there's a different site that is separated, that is measured separately. And it's all done, like I said, with a measuring wheel. And we understand that that wheel is not 100% accurate. It has to, if the grow goes over and is over by quite a large amount, the grower has the ability or has the opportunity to actually hire a surveyor and measure that grow as they would choose to. I mean, that's always an option on their part.
Okay.
Okay?
So they might be cited in that regards, and then an opportunity for them to either come back and say, this is our survey response, or take out whatever is necessary.
Oh, that's correct. They could be cited. We could discuss the situation with them. They could just say, hey, I'm going to get this surveyed, or no, I'm going to move some of this, then get this surveyed, and I'll bring it into compliance. There's always a middle ground there or something we can negotiate with them.
Okay, all right.
Okay?
All right, thank you. And how, if they disagree with it, is there an appeal process set up, or is that something you're considering?
Yes, there is an appeal process set up, just as if any other code violation. They are handled a little bit different. Actually, we're still kind of working on matching the two up, I believe, in Title 17. But the appeal processes are quite, for the housing appeals and the Title 17 appeals, they're quite similar. I'll say that. Did I get out of that?
Mr. Barr, what is the time period between inspection and citation? Does it vary, or is there a set day, or a set amount of days?
It does vary. It does vary.
And how is that determined?
That's determined, if there are violations that can be eliminated and need to be eliminated, we don't have to, but we do give a reasonable amount of time for them to eliminate those violations. So it depends on what the violations may be and what a reasonable amount of time might be for them to eliminate those.
What's the fastest time?
Usually 10 days.
10 days?
Usually 10 days.
And that's set by code, correct?
The amount of time set is not, it's not set by code. Code compliance can set the amount of time they give any landowner for any violation, a reasonable amount of time to correct the problem. But typically, the average is that they're given 10 days to correct the violation. And then there's a 20-day appeal period for any citation. And the 20-day appeal period for the citation is in the code.
Council, it's my understanding that we have a draft regarding, in fact, it might be in code compliance now. It was going back and forth between county council regarding the marijuana procedures for code compliance. Is that true?
He's talking about 8.06.
If you review,
All
their
codes.
code compliance is working on an update to 8.06, and that, I believe, is being brought forward for introduction at the next regular board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
But that's just not for cannabis, that's for all.
8.06, which governs
Cannabis.
code compliance, including
compliance.
cannabis.
Code
Yeah,
compliance.
so that- and I believe that has been submitted at this point.
Good.
That's the last report that I got.
Thank you.
Which should significantly reduce the amount of time to process things.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
8.06.
Yeah, it should, the new one should significantly reduce the time to process, and that's the whole thing, is we're trying to, we're working with county council to bring that time in, basically for the efficiency of the unit, and so that things aren't drug out over months and months. So,
Right.
okay.
It'll be interesting to see that.
And one final question, Mr. Barr.
Yes.
Future planning. Let's say in November, Proposition C passes. What kind of impact is that going to have on code compliance as sheriff's department?
C or D?
C or D?
C,
Taxation?
taxation.
Should have a good impact.
And are we making plans for something like that? Or?
We have not addressed that yet. We have been struggling to keep up with the immediate. We are looking down the road, and like I said, we are looking ahead. But no, we have not had those discussions yet.
I can tell you that I've been in code enforcement and visited them quite a few times, and those folks are doing a really good job. They're working pretty darn hard over there, and just as planning too. I know that they are too. So it's a new process for everybody, and I think it just takes a little time bringing it in. And, I don't think, I think that people think that it's kind of like a TV station, where you just switch a channel and it's automatically done. It's a process I think will take. This year here is very challenging for us for sure. Next year it'll probably be a little bit better, and the year after that we should have a pretty good handle on it. So.
Yeah, I actually think we've got a good thing going. And as wintertime approaches, it's going to give us a chance to take a look at the mixed light stuff. That'll give us a little bit of a break, and also it's going to give us that time in that break so that we can refine what we've seen over the past few months, and then help get these the newer officers up to speed on the things that they need to be up to speed on. So.
And one final question, Mr. Barr. I received a phone call from one of my constituents last night indicating that his 82-year-old father was living in a home that he owns, and he was surrounded by grows, and his father was suffering health-wise. In fact, he was going to be taken to the doctor today due to the fumes from the marijuana plants. Is there any violation or code violation that we could look at, or is that an actual violation we would even bother with?
I'd have to actually look at the site. That'd be assuming too much to give you a pat answer here, but I would be willing to look at the site and
Is there something
and
that
give
we
you
could
that.
at least investigate? Do we have a violation by odor?
We can take a look at it. You bet. We can take a look at it.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening, Jim Macedo, Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff DiBasilio is away in training. He asked me to send his apologies for not being here. I'm going to go through some statistics to start out with. I'll talk about background statistics, and then I'll talk about the sworn side of the house, the officers that are assisting code enforcement and the other county and state agencies, and then I'll take questions. In regards to backgrounds, to date, and when I say to date, it was September 26th, 450 people have been fingerprinted at the Sheriff's Office. 112 project backgrounds have been completed and submitted to planning. 30 project backgrounds have been completed and will be submitted to planning this week. That'd be 30 additional. 244 projects are pending responses from the Department of Justice and outside law enforcement agencies or from the Sheriff's Office for data entry or review. That means they're pending, the results are not back in yet. Background packets have been sent to all the applicants. A total of 386 projects out of the 801 we'd received that required backgrounds have been addressed by the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office. On the marijuana enforcement side, the number of marijuana plants destroyed this year so far has been 61,467. I'm told that's a record. Inspections completed by the Sheriff's Office, and I'm going to put parameters on the date, between July 20th of 2016 and August 23rd of 2016, so just a little over a month and 3 days. There were 41 inspections completed during that time frame. I do not have up-to-date stats on that particular item. Complaints filed with the Sheriff's Office relating to marijuana, 213. Requests for denial of registration submitted by the Sheriff's Office to planning, and this again predated to the 23rd, have been 33. Those are not background denials. Those are other denials, and those are just Sheriff's Office alone. Those are not code enforcement, joint. Yes?
How many plants do you say you eradicated?
61,467 as of the 23rd. There have been additional plants eradicated since then.
Thank you.
CAL FIRE has issued 18 land use violations. That is of the Public Resources Code involving marijuana. There's 8 more pending. The average length, and this is something I think the board will be interested in, the average length of inspection time for a personal caregiver grow by the Sheriff's Office is roughly 15 minutes. That does not include drive time. That includes from the time we arrive to the time we leave. The average length of inspection time for a commercial grow is roughly between 45 minutes and 1.5 hours. We currently have 35 known unregistered grows. We currently have 20 open criminal cases. Again, that was of the 23rd. And that was specifically related to the marijuana ordinance, not outside, not other separate criminal investigations regarding cultivation. Sheriff's Office has served 25 search warrants related to marijuana. Those are criminal search warrants, not administrative. We've had assistance from 18 non-county agencies from outside the county. And we've, as of the 23rd, we made 5 arrests, again, specifically related to the urgency ordinance. The length of inspections varies based upon the number and severity of the compliance issues at the location. It's also affected by the terrain where they're cultivating, the layout of the grow, and the difficulty sometimes involved in measuring the canopy. Grow sites with the poor, disorganized layout can take as long as 2 hours to inspect and measure. You'll have to forgive me. There's certain criminal cases I'm not going to talk about today. There's certain issues that I'm not prepared to talk about today, but I will take some questions. And if I tell you I'm not going to talk about it, sorry, but I'm not going to talk about that particular issue because it's either tied into a criminal case or I don't have the information for you. I'll take questions.
Question? So of the 25 search warrants, does that equal to the 61,467 eradicated plants?
Some of them yes, some of them no.
Of the 61,467 plants, are these unregistered?
Some of them yes, some of them no.
Do you have any idea how many were registered?
I do not have a breakdown, no.
Can you get that?
Possibly. I will check.
Thank you.
Captain, can you just run past the procedure when somebody calls into the tip line how that particular call is handled and who's assigned to and what happens? Example, I'm John Doe, I call in, say, my neighbor's got a bunch of plants down here, probably more than 100. And I know he doesn't have any licenses or doesn't have any applications. How do we handle something like that?
When the call's received, if nobody answers the call, they obviously collect what information's on the call, and they have a matrix, kind of a checklist that they utilize. Obviously, we want to know if it's registered. That's one of the first things we look at. We obviously look and see if there's any active open criminal investigations and if somebody is already assigned to that particular case. Depending upon that answer and where the matrix leads us, if it leads us to kind of a high risk, multiple complaints, criminal activity involved, it's obviously placed high in the queue, for lack of a better term. If it's registered and we've already been there, we have some idea of what's going on, then generally speaking, there's not a high threat level or a significant number of complaints from the public. It's placed in a low queue. There's other factors in there involving the size of the grow. Without having the matrix in front of me, that's kind of the best I can explain it at this point.
On your number of 35 unknown grows, did I hear that correctly?
35 known unregistered grows.
Okay. And is that from surveillance or from the tip line, or?
That could be from a variety of information.
Okay.
How many officers do we have actually assigned to the marijuana unit now?
You have 2 full-time deputy sheriffs and 1 sheriff's sergeant. However, those officers are still going to court. They have training. They have, internal responsibilities in addition to this. And I think I've mentioned this to the board too. Because of their funding source, it makes it incredibly difficult when we have to pull them off of marijuana-related cases. But due to cases that go on, there's times when we need to be all hands on deck. So that's part of what's complicating this, is when we have a major case, we grab staff, we run with that case as far as we can, and then you have to go back and pick up where you left off.
How's our total manpower, or womanpower, if you will, looking for the department with our trainees and training academy, things of that sort?
It's pretty fluid, Supervisor Oliveira. I'll try and stick with marijuana. We are currently hiring deputy sheriffs, although as we hire deputy sheriffs, we do still have deputy sheriffs that are leaving. We have 2 backgrounds out right now for internal sheriff services techs to do backgrounds. We have a couple extra hire people right now that are helping out doing them, and 1 volunteer that's been with us for a while. So we're trying to work, and we also have a full-time sheriff services tech that does handle some civil stuff, but she's taken the lead on a lot of the background information. So inside the office, we currently have roughly 3 to 4 people, depending on the time of day, working on the background portion. But as it relates to the field itself, there's really been only 3 people. However, just like I said, sometimes the marijuana enforcement staff have to leave and go detail with other duties. Yesterday, as an example, we had an incredibly large grow that was very staff intensive. Took a lot of time, a lot of assistance. We had to use public works and some heavy equipment. And this was not a big grow. This was a 150 plant grow that took several dump trucks to get it out of there. It took a large piece of equipment just to pick the weight of it up to get it into the dump trucks. And staff started that at 7 a.m. and I think they got done around 3 or 4. They would have been there all night had they not had the heavy equipment assistance involved in that case.
I noticed in our documentation we have...
Can I just add something to that, Supervisor Oliveira? That was a unregistered grow that was purported to have been registered, and simply it was an illegal criminal organization type situation that was utilizing the guise of our current system.
I noticed in our documentation we have 4 extra hire sheriff technicians. Now, I assume they would be doing the background checks and the office work?
Correct. I believe it's 2 full-time and 2 extra hire is the makeup of that. And then there's supposed to be 4 deputy sheriffs working marijuana. Again, we're trying to hire those folks. We were fortunate that the 2 that were were in there, we had to assign them basically due to the created emergency by the influx of marijuana, including the supervisor. But once the urgency ordinance was passed, there was a, excuse me, a funding mechanism to pay for that. So right now, there's 3, but due to the number of complaints, the fact that this ordinance is statistic-driven, the fact that the financial backing for those employees is directly tied to marijuana is causing that supervisor to have to really spend a lot of time coaching, supervising, and managing the ordinance rather than being a teammate, so to speak, and able to take on the investigator role. He is in the field with them as much as he can, but the way this ordinance was structured with the funding and all the equipment that needs to be purchased and new staff going in there and the training, it's really, it hasn't allowed him to be in the field as much as we would like. We're really trying to push him in the field and take some of those duties and responsibilities off his back. But the problem is the staff that would normally be doing that is being pressed significantly by other violent criminal cases that have occurred recently.
I thought we had allocated 6 deputies.
There are allocated positions, 6 deputy sheriffs and the sheriff sergeant, 2 sheriff, permanent sheriff's service technicians, and we did have funding for 4 extra hire service technicians included in the budget.
So not 2 full-time, 2 extra hire?
2 full-time, 4 extra hire.
Okay.
That was what the sheriff requested.
Okay, that was my error.
What's the hurdles, Captain?
The hurdles are if we pull somebody off of another unit, our detective division is already overworked and depleted. We cannot pull any more people off of patrol and assign them to marijuana. So our hurdles really, staffing-wise, involve getting people hired and retention, which that's another board meeting and another day. I can tell you the ordinance itself is not favorable. It does not help us in doing expedient backgrounds. It does not allow us to do thorough backgrounds. I believe the sheriff has spoken to you, the board, about that, and that'll be addressed hopefully at a later date when the urgency ordinance is either updated or a permanent ordinance is put in place. There has been a lot of deception and dishonesty relating to the backgrounds, which is requiring further investigation. There's a lot of straw men, and I've spoken to the board about that in the past, about my concern that continues. So there's, I don't know how to define it because it's so many different things that people are trying to do to manipulate the system. I'll generally call it garbage. There's a lot of garbage going on, and people, that's extending our process internally, and it's also extending our process in the field.
Thank you.
How long does it take to do a background check?
Which
On the
portion?
average? On the average?
Which portion are you referring to? The entire time? Mm-hmm. So somebody comes in and gets fingerprinted, those results are not, and they fill out a background form and turn that in. They get fingerprinted, those results are not immediate. It kind of depends on the person about how long it takes those to come back. Once they come back in, a folder is prepared with the information on that particular person. It is reviewed by Sheriff's Services tech staff, and any pertinent information that the reviewing party would want to know is included. It's essentially placed in a folder and shipped up the chain of command for review. I reviewed several yesterday. I think I reviewed about 35 yesterday, and it took me about 4 hours to review 35 because I had to look at the information that was found, verify it against the application, and some of the charges I kind of had to look at and weigh as far as what they were in relationship to, what was being asked. Some involve only one person on the background application. Some have multiple people on the background. And if I could say this too, because when I was doing the backgrounds and talking to staff, one of the things that I hope that the board understood, because when we talked about the urgency ordinance and the ordinance, the sheriff's office clearly expressed a lot of concerns about the background. Some of those were taken into consideration, and they were placed into the ordinance and our background authority. Some were not, and they were pulled out, and those have turned out to be problems, and we're going to hope to get those back in at a later date. But when the backgrounds are submitted to the sheriff's office, and we are where it's very cut and clean that per se the subject has a felony conviction, and the subject is actually the person that lives there, it can go rather quickly. If the person is dishonest with us, it takes a while for us to verify that person is who they're saying they are. And also, again, we're relying upon outside agencies and the Department of Justice to report back to us, because we're having a lot of people saying they've never been arrested, never had a charge, never had a conviction, and it turns out that is just wholeheartedly false. And when you're talking about the timing relating to harvest and the time of the year we're in, there's some people that there's no incentive for them to be honest, in hopes that nobody will get to their background, and we're also trying to address that, both internally and in the field.
Captain, is there any violation when providing that false information?
People are signing the background under penalty of perjury, and that is something that we'll be discussing with the district attorney's office at a later date. As far as whether charges are filed, ultimately that'll be dependent upon a case that's put together and submitted to the DA's office.
Thank you.
So I have a question on the form, because at one point I know the ordinance says this is what we're looking for, and when the form came out, there was much more information that was being asked.
Correct.
Was that form revised to indicate that it was optional?
Unfortunately, it was. And I
Okay.
want to emphasize the word unfortunately, because it's going to make further problems for the sheriff's office or any other law enforcement agency that could be confronted with one of our cultivators down the road.
Any other questions?
What's the cost of a background check?
Through the Department of Justice, I do not think I have that with me. There's two fees. So the sheriff's office charges an internal rolling fee, and then the Department of Justice charges an additional fee. And unfortunately, I do not know the answer, and I don't believe there's anybody here from the sheriff's office that could
Do we
answer that.
charge that up front to the applicant?
Yes, yes we do.
Is that going into a special fund?
That has always gone into a fund. It's not, the marijuana portion is not being separated off. So we have a fingerprinting fund within the sheriff's office budget. And what happens is the fees for those go into a designated fund, so that when we need to replace those machines are incredibly expensive. They're about $20,000, $30,000. But there's a pre-established fund to pay for those. You've probably heard me express some concern about that in the past when we've dipped into that fund for other things, and I won't go there, but
So can you get the cost to me, please?
sure.
Thank you.
Nothing further? Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
Can I have public's comment on what you heard?
Bill Wilson, Circle 20. I think Mr. Maurer, I think the Sheriff's Department, I think everybody is trying to do everything they can to sort through the just overwhelming amount of stuff that's going on here. And after 80 years of prohibition, we've had approximately 4 months of regulation. I think, even though there's only 2 people that have made it through the process so far, they are making it through the process. The process is working. There are bad apples. There are still moonshiners out there that make illegal alcohol 80 years after prohibition was repealed. There's never going to be a clean slate where every illegal marijuana grower is out of the picture. That's never going to happen, unfortunately. But I think under regulation, we at least have those people that want to do it and do it right, have that opportunity to come in here, present their package, pay their fees, start their farm, start a business in this community, and pay taxes. None of that 66,000 plants that the sheriff's office was able to eradicate, not one penny was ever collected from those plants. All of it was a cost. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Vicki Reinke, Angels Camp. Thank you for this report, because I know we've all been wondering how is it going. And I do talked to a lot of people out in the community, and there's a lot of questions, and I wanted to ask some of those questions and hope to get an answer, because it's hard to understand sometimes the logic and reason behind this whole, well, I call it a fiasco. But anyway, couple of things. One is, I've never heard an answer to how many grows were actually legal grows prior to the January 2016 new law that came into play. I know there were a lot of grows here in Calaveras County, but I've never seen a number that were truly legal under Prop 215. I've read the laws, I know what they were allowed to do, so I'm curious if there were actually who was legal at the time. The other is, I know Peter Maurer said that if an applicant is denied, the grower is considered an illegal grow. So my question is, why aren't all these grows right now illegal with only 2 registrations approved? That means all the rest of them are growing here illegally. And that is a huge question that I know not just myself, but a lot of people are asking. So you need to answer that, please. The other is, why is our county hiring all this personnel just to regulate marijuana growing in our county? Again, I believe the majority of people here do not agree with this industry that you call it, but anyway, that's 18 positions in this one list that was given that are not law enforcement. So, you know, we're spending a lot of money in all of our departments just to put together this program to allow people to cultivate marijuana in our county. We need an answer to that. And also, another question that keeps coming up, and we've never heard an answer to, and that is, how can the county take cash from a drug business and put it into a bank?
30 seconds.
To me and to others, that's laundering drug money. So you need to answer that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Kaz Tomaszewski, Calaveras Cannabis Alliance. First off, I had a couple of questions. When did the first inspections start? Maybe Todd Barr would know.
Let's go ahead and ask your questions and then.
Okay, so when did the inspections start? I was wondering if the sheriff's statistics, if that existed in print anywhere, and if we could have access to that, because I thought those numbers were very interesting. We'd love to take a look at them. The other question I have is, of the 29 new positions created to help deal with the urgency ordinance, how many of them have actually gotten to a point where they are hired, trained, and operating? I think we've seen evidence that there's a backlog in the system, and I'm interested to know how much we're going to be able to improve on that backlog via the positions we've already set aside under the urgency ordinance. And so I'm interested to know how many of those positions are up and running right now. Another thing I wanted to say is, of the 61 site inspections, I think I've received personal calls in about 20 of them. Overwhelmingly, the feedback is positive. Code compliance and the sheriff's department are treating our people with respect as human beings. And the issue of inspectors not calling before they show up hasn't been that much of a problem, because our growers are actually so happy with the way they're being treated. And I wanted to say thank you for the county departments for doing that. It sounds like the inspections are thorough and they're treating people with respect, and that means the world to us. I think that there's a lot of evidence that is coming up through this program of the things that we've been saying for a long time, this division amongst growers. You have evidence of the people starting to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. You're seeing the people trying to game the system, but you're also seeing a lot of evidence, and I know I've talked to some inspectors of those of us that are good folks that have been kind of like hiding in the wings a lot of times, been a little bit under the radar, and been good neighbors. On CCA's side, what this has done is some pretty amazing things. The sheriff department, for the first time in our memory, recently tracked down and arrested some people that were coming up here to rip off grows.
30 seconds.
The apprehension of this suspect, we had told our growers, instead of resorting to violence or threatening, stand back, be calm, call the sheriff. They did. The sheriff department investigated, they caught the criminal, and the response from our community has been massive. They're coming out because they believe in regulation. We're having the biggest meetings we've ever had. We're getting more volunteers than we've ever had. And we're starting to see the benefit of this as people are starting to get faith in it and believe in it and feel a way about the county code compliance and sheriff's department they never have before. So yeah, my question's, how many of the positions do we have up and running? How much of this backlog is going to improve with things that have already been planned for? When inspections start, and if we could get sheriff statistics. Thank you.
Judy Hawkins, Human Resources Director. I can tell you what positions we still are currently recruiting for. We do have the 2 service tech positions. We have completed interviews. And
Is that
so
for the sheriff?
Yes, for the Sheriff's Department. We do have 4 Deputy Sheriff 1-2 positions open that we are actively recruiting for. The ag biologist will be starting on October 3rd. We do have an environmental health technician, which will be starting on October 19th. And the environmental health specialist, we are recruiting for. We have 2 positions, and we have no applications at this time.
So all the extra hires have been hired and are working on this list?
No, that's sheriff's deputies work, right?
Well, we got 4 extra hire sheriff service techs, 4 extra hire planners, 1 extra hire office tech for planning, and 1 extra hire tax technician.
I can address the planning positions. I do have the permanent planner position filled. I have 1 extra hire planner position. I have the extra hire office tech, and I actually underfilled one of the planner positions with an additional office tech. So we're 2 people short of what was authorized.
And I apologize, I just have the permanent positions. I don't have the extra hires.
And on code enforcement, Todd, when you mentioned the 3, so I take it your positions are filled?
Yes, all the permanent positions are filled.
Thank you.
I'm Ethan Turner. I'm Deputy County Counsel. My position has been filled. And just to reiterate something that Peter was saying, he's sort of nonchalant and humble, but the undertaking that he has done is really amazing. Since I've been here, I've been reviewing all the indemnity agreements, which couldn't be done because there wasn't anyone to do it. And yesterday, Peter and I signed several hundred of them, or on Friday. And now code compliance has to go inspect all those sites. And you're going to see a lot more approvals soon, and also a lot more abatements. The lady asked how all these registrations could be occurring and why they aren't illegal. They've all been issued pending applications. And so these are all people who are currently complying and who will be found to either comply or not comply with the law. And overall, I mean, code compliance, the sheriff and Peter, it's just amazing. And Megan's job too has really been an amazing undertaking. I mean, just staggering the amount of work they've done and then the challenges they face. Thank you.
Excuse me. Did you introduce your name?
Oh, yes, I'm Ethan Turner.
Okay, Ethan.
Yeah.
All right, so Ethan was, go ahead.
Ethan is the deputy county counsel that the board funded specific for the urgency ordinance. So I was able to hire Ethan. He's been with my office now for about 3 weeks. It's been a huge benefit to my office having Ethan and having that additional resource specific to the urgency ordinance. So there can be that dedicated review, and then also allowing the other attorneys in my office to assist him where necessary, but also get onto other issues within the county that are not related to the urgency ordinance.
Yeah, prior to my arrival, Sarah was helping code compliance with related to marijuana issues. Julie was helping planning related to marijuana issues and not being able to do their ordinary work. And now I'm here to help a little bit with that.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Okay. Anybody want to take a crack at answering these questions? Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Mike Falvey, Mountain Ranch. I live within 1 mile of the geographical center of the Butte Fire, and I feel I live in the epicenter of the land rush that followed the Butte Fire and subsequent proliferation of commercial grows in my area. Number one, I think that 700 commercial grows in this county is way too many. Too many, I won't say way too many, but too many. And that's not even taking into consideration the ones that aren't compliant or registered or whatever you want to call it. I don't see how this county can handle enforcing the regulations on 700 commercial grows. And, you know, there's a place for commercial everything. It isn't in residential areas. And you know what, I realize it's how the land is, what's the word I'm trying to say, what is zoned, excuse me, been here a long day. The zoning, I realize, you know, they're probably, most of them are legal. That doesn't make them right. Like I said, I live where I consider is pretty much the center of this new industry. I like the smell of marijuana. I've loved the smell of marijuana for more than 40 years. And, but it's overwhelming in my case. It's really overwhelming. I was up at 5 o'clock the other morning and typing a letter, and all of a sudden my house became inundated. My wife got up, she thought the dog puked. I mean, she came out of the bedroom, and I said, no, honey, it's just, you know, the windows were open, it's warm. Our house was just inundated. I have had two, I mean, I'm not asking for, you know, sympathy or anything, but I've had a couple of allergic reactions that I've never had before, and it just coincided with fumes coming into my house, onto my property.
30 seconds.
I'm all for the legalization of marijuana for personal use and medical use. What I'm not in favor of is the rampant, uncontrolled commercial uses in our residential areas. I think that needs to be addressed a little more than it has been. And I'll take any questions. And I'm representing, I think, quite a few people in the county, and I'll take any questions.
I got to tell you that I don't think that a lot of people around you are legal.
Aren't?
I don't think they're legal.
Oh, I don't have numbers, but you're right.
So, you know, when the process starts working, they'll whittle it out. The legal ones will stay, and the illegal ones will go.
Okay, so what does the average person do about the overwhelming personal effects that some of these operations have on us when we're surrounded by a commercial aspect in a residential area? Or what?
I understand. We have to work through the system and eliminate the ones that are illegal.
Okay. I see where you're standing. Thank you.
My name is Larry Bridges. I'll make this short. First off, I want to thank everyone for the work and the effort that's gone into this subject, regardless of which side of the fence you're on. This is America. We have disputes. Hopefully in time we get them worked out. Code enforcement has had an awesome responsibility put on them, and they've done a tremendous job. Planning the same way, Sheriff's Department the same way. I do have a question, and I apologize that we were late getting here, and maybe this can be addressed, and that is, we've had reports. I understand that we have applications. We have to get through those applications. That is an important issue. But I think I'm personally, and I'll bet a lot of people in this county are even more concerned with those grows that are out there that do not have applications pending. I've had 3 people in my office in the last week and a half that own property and have renters. And they came in saying, what do? I have people growing not only on the parcel that they are renting, but my adjacent property that they have no access to. So I just want to offer that out, and maybe we can get some answers to it and maybe work on some priorities in that direction, because I think that's where we're getting a lot of bad element around. Anyway, thank you.
Any other public comments? No? Okay. There's a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Dina Morris. I just want to say that since the urgency ordinance has been in place, I've had a lot of complaints into code compliance since last year, and I still don't see any results on that. So I'm sure that people who have complaints in about marijuana grows around them, whether they are legal or illegal, probably won't see any results this year, and I'm not so sure that they'll see any next year. So I just wanted to mention that for anyone out there that's thinking they can call code compliance and get results immediately. That's not how it works. There's a lot of red tape that code compliance has to go through and follow in order for anyone to see results. So you're going to have an extreme amount of patience to see results from our code compliance. And the sheriff's hands are tied. They really can't do much unless it is a severely illegal operation going on around you. And again, I don't see more law enforcement to keep the kids safe, the children that have to walk back and forth past grows, and I don't know if they're legal or illegal, but the point is, as Captain Macedo said, there's a lot of illegal grows trying to pass as legal grows, and our children have to walk past these grows twice a day to get to their bus because their parents aren't able to take them because their parents work. And again, I don't see more law enforcement. These kids are not in a gated community. There are no security guards. It's a rural area, and they're at great risk. And I think that's something that really needs to be looked at, is getting more law enforcement to protect the kids out there. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments? No? Questions or comments from the board?
No.
You guys want to try to answer some of these questions?
Well, as I understand it, on the 215 grows, they didn't register, so there's really no way to know. Is that true?
That's correct. We do not have a number of how many people were growing here. There's a number of estimates that are out there. They vary widely depending on who you talk to, but we do not have any listing or registration of former grows.
So
this is the first time that we have a list of.
So prior to the state law, there was really nothing there for any kind of reporting at any level for any kind of jurisdiction?
Certainly not that I'm aware of. The sheriff's office may have had some data, but there was no formal registration process that was in place, certainly not at the county level, that we would have a clear understanding or clear list of here are all the people that were growing under 215 or 240 requirements.
So with the passage of state law and us creating the urgency ordinance, it gave us an ability to have people register and be able to track from that point.
Yes, we're starting to track from May 10th, urgency ordinance.
Thank you.
I think there was another question as far as, well, Ms. Renke brought up the issue of whether or not someone who is, has applied for registration but hasn't been issued is considered illegal. Mr. Turner, Ethan Turner, sort of responded, but just wanted to reiterate that, they're in process right now. And they wouldn't be considered illegal until such time as they were denied and they've exhausted their appeal process.
How about the cash issue?
I can address that. The law is very clear that jurisdictions, so the county can impose fees for the reasonable regulatory costs for issuing licenses, permits, registrations, performing inspections, investigations, administrative enforcements, and so on. The law is very clear that jurisdictions can recoup those costs when there is a regulatory program that the county or the jurisdiction is implementing. So the fee is for the costs that the county is incurring with staffing and for actually providing those services. And so the law is very clear that when we are recouping the cost of implementing a regulatory program, that is what the fee is, and that is what it is to do, is to recover the cost incurred for those services rendered.
I think she's referring to the fact that it's cash.
Yeah, it's referring to the fact
Cash
that...
versus check versus credit card.
Any regulatory program that the county has, so if it is somebody applying for a conditional use permit for any purpose, an administrative use permit, a map, vacation rental, whatever regulatory program it is, the registrant can pay cash, can pay check, can as long as the fee is covered. At this point, I don't know if I don't think that the county even accepts credit card. I don't think that we have the resources to do that. So I think any fee that the county collects is either cash or check for any fee or any regulatory program.
There are some credit card opportunities.
It's starting to be implemented. It's good to hear.
Well, there are some now and more to follow.
There are also some questions about the personnel and how they're being paid for. They're being paid for by the registration fee.
They are.
The personnel, and also significant capital purchases were made by the registration fee. And funding for an EIR, and also the funding for the attorney we hired, correct? That was included in the registration fee.
All of the costs for administering, implementing, and enforcing the regulatory program is covered by the fee.
I haven't seen a charge for gasoline or anything of that nature. Is that going to be assessed?
There is. When we did the final budget, we included, in that final budget is a little over $2.8 million. That's personnel costs, that's capital equipment costs, that is other equipment costs, that is overtime costs, that is gas and oil cost. It's a variety of things. And that's just based on what we think we're going to need. As we move forward through this, we may be making mid-year adjustments and adding to those as we determine our additional needs.
Thank you. Somebody asked, Captain, if you would be willing to share the stats you were reading off in a memo or something of a posting or...
Whoever would like...
I will even say I was listening to you, but I had to go, what did you just say? And go back.
If somebody wants the stats, they can come by the office and do a Public Records Act request. If a member of the public is asking for those stats, and it'll be processed through records.
All right, any other comments?
The first inspection, the date of the first inspection? Do we have a,
I don't remember, I'd have to look it up, quite honestly, it's been a while. It was within a couple of weeks after the final date in planning. I believe we started at that point addressing complaints.
like mid-July?
Yes, approximately mid-July.
Okay. Thank you.
We miss anybody's question?
All right, thanks. Let's move on, please. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Thank you, Captain, for staying up for a second.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, Captain.
We're not done. We're not done. We're not done. We're not done. We still have the consent agenda. We still have the consent agenda and reports.
No,
We're
we
not
still
done.
have, we still have the rest of the agenda to go through.
I think this, are you looking for
I
your
have to
receipts?
show you.
Yes, that's all. I was getting
Peter, did you pick up Ms. Sullivan's receipts that when,
Are we taking a break?
Where's your gavel?
No.
Okay.
I apologize.
We need to continue the meeting.
So this is a consent agenda item. We'll just run through it. All right, so we're going to go to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion. Does anybody wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Any member of the public? Any member of the board?
No.
All right, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I have a motion by Supervisor Ponte,
Second.
second by Supervisor Kearney. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And supervisor announcements.
I'm gonna, at this late hour, I'll pass.
I'm going to divert to our next meeting.
Okay.
I guess I will too.
Me too.
could I make
Sorry,
an
I have to-
could I make an announcement? After nearly 27 years with the county, I want to
Hang
know.
on. Let everyone
Can
have
you
a
close
chair.
the door, please?
Thank you. After nearly 27 years with the county, I want to notify the board of my intent to retire at the end of this year. When I accepted the position of CAO, I told the board then that I would delay my retirement at least until the end of 2016, and at that time I would consider the possibility of working an additional year. However, I've decided to move forward with my retirement plans. My last day in office will be December 28th. As you know, I plan to take a 2-week vacation to Ireland with my daughter, and I will be out of the office from October 19th and will return on November 3rd. During that time, there is a board meeting which Assistant CAO Brian Moss will sit in for me. Even though I know that this board will want to defer the appointment of the CAO to the board that will be seated in January, I felt it important to provide a 90-day notice so the recruitment process for a new CAO could at least begin. I want to thank the board for the opportunity as CAO and especially appreciate the support I have received from department heads and staff.
Good luck. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley. You're going to be missed. You're going to be missed.
Okay.
And all those people left. They should have stayed.
You know, we should have done that like 10 minutes ago.
Well, Dana stayed and he's got a scoop now.
All right, so I guess the meeting's adjourned.
Diane has it. Diane has it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diane, go ahead.
It's all right.
No, meeting unadjourned.
So I wanted to announce that this Friday, LAFCO is hosting a finance training for special districts. I believe there are still seats available, lunch is provided. If you have any questions, you can call me. Also on October 14th, LAFCO is hosting an ethics training to meet any special districts or appointed officials, elected or appointed officials, AB 1234 training. It will be here in the boardroom October 14th from 2 to 4 p.m. We'd like it if you could let us know if you're going to attend, and seating is limited. That's it.
Okay, so I'd like to say thank you to our incredible staff for this, sticking out this day. I know that it was really tough on everybody, but appreciate, I mean, you guys are great, greatest staff in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.